Hi there, welcome back. My name is Sheldon McLeod. This is Thinking Out Loud. It's my opportunity to talk with folks about the stories in the news and beyond the headlines. And, I've never really worked food service. The disclaimers, our fire department used to hold a monthly fundraising breakfast. And once a month, it was still a lot of work. And I can truly respect the job that those folks do who are there to cook our food, present our food, serve our food. And it's been a few years, actually, since the start of the pandemic. There's a story at saltwire.com today that caught my eye that we wanted to at least highlight to you. The headline, economists and chefs say PEI food industry has to change to deal with labor shortage. And in some ways, they're saying what had happened during the pandemic was that in a lot of ways, some folks decided it wasn't the career for them, or at least the circumstances. The situation meant they have moved on. And there are reasons for perhaps a stronger look at what is happening, and perhaps asking or answering that question I have is whether or not back to school, back to university is going to impact an already challenged labor market. And Gordon Stewart is here with us, and he is with the Restaurant Association of Nova Scotia. Gordon Stewart, so nice to see you, sir.
Good to be back, Sheldon.
And this idea that we're in a labor crunch, what are you hearing from your members about how severe or serious this is right now?
There's no question it's a very serious. On the scale of 1 to 10, it's the 10. And it's unfortunate. I think the challenging part of this labor situation is that it's going to continue for a very long period of time. If we look at the demographics alone, in order to build up enough of just Canadian labor pool, it's going to be within probably 5, 6, 7 years. So it's a very long schedule. And so that it's going to be a big challenge for the industry. And the shortage of the labor pool is causing a number of dominoes falling within restaurants, which is really going to be very painful for them to absorb.
Is there any evidence that when university students either return to class, or high school students even, are perhaps not as available for work, that this is going to exacerbate an already challenging situation?
Yeah, no doubt about it. It will seriously affect the labor pool. There's a lot of university students, and of course, Nova Scotia is full of university, which is great because that's part of the labor pool. And some will continue to work, part-time and on weekends and nights and stuff like that. That will be helpful, but it won't be able to fill the vacuum once it's gone. Most of the high school students will obviously be gone. Occasionally, they might work on some weekend shifts or something like that, but that's all will be available overall.
And through media, we've heard stories of restaurant owners who've said, you know what, this is getting to the point where it's no longer profitable, no longer sustainable. We can't continue to lose money. And there was a Cape Breton restaurant owner who said, my rent is going up by, a significant amount in January. It's a time of the year that's normally quiet. So they've decided they're not going to be around much longer. How often are you hearing stories like that, Gordon?
Yeah, well, certainly they have started for sure, and I think through the next period of time, next year, we'll see more and more. I think the complications of the labor pool puts pressure basically on generating sales because we're not open as many hours. So that means the profitability is down. So your ability to pay is far less than it was even 2 years ago, or even during the pandemic. The impact and the effects of the labor pool is much greater than the impact of COVID. That's how big this problem is going to be.
And for folks who perhaps have been, struggling, I noticed that prices have gone up in many establishments. They've had to increase because of supply chain issues. Is that just slowing down the bleeding, or is it in some ways helping?
It's slowing the bleeding a little bit, but I think it's a compound problem. So we've had huge supply increases in terms of food costing. So, between like April of last year and April this year, I think our food costs in restaurants on average went up by 17.8%. That's a lot. So that means somewhere along the line, you got to be able to either add that pricing on the consumer price, or you got to be able to adjust your menus or change your menus enough that you're going to make some profit in that. So that pricing point for the public is going to be challenging. And the other side of the coin is that you have to redo your menu. So you've already mentioned some impacts like shorter hours during the days, shorter days in the weeks. A lot of people are closed Tuesday now. Monday is the most common day to be closed across Nova Scotia, which is actually having an impact on our tourism sector because people can't find a place to eat. So that's been very challenging. And the other time is that restaurants are over busy. The ones that are going are over busy, and so the service level is not as high as it normally would be, just because there's not enough restaurants open full hours to do it. So people are jamming, so wait times are longer, and there's shortages on the supply line. So there's a lot of impact as we go along.
I can't imagine how frustrating it is to know that you might even be able to fulfill. You might have more customers than normal, but yet because of labor issues, you're challenged to serve them.
Well, that's exactly the case. Many restaurants, let's assume they have 100-seat capacity. They're only taking 60 to 70 seats because that's all they can serve at a reasonable level, and even that, in some cases, may be pushing it. So the message is to the general public is be patient. There are issues out there that this industry has never experienced before, and they're not going away. So if you're short-tempered and don't like to wait, a restaurant probably is not the place for you today.
I have to ask your thoughts. There was a story a few weeks ago that Michael Smith, a chef on Prince Edward Island, said, listen, even the dish pit, it's hard to find staff. So I've offered a competitive wage and benefits to a position that was normally, the lowest, entry-level position within the kitchen. Any thoughts on that idea that perhaps this is a money issue or a benefits issue, and attracting and retaining will take more resources that way?
So definitely, I think prior to the pandemic, wages were one of the reasons some people left. We actually did a study on people leaving the industry, why they left the industry. So we knew that was one of them overall. But wages since then have gone up considerably, like double digits in our industry right across, and it's going to go up even more. Like I know people in dish pits that are offering $20 an hour to work in a dish pit, and even higher. So most of the jobs now no one's getting hired unless they're getting a half decent wage. And then I think what you're going to see is the restaurants start adding a layer of extra benefits on top of that, more flex hours, maybe benefit programs, of buying power to do certain services that might help them in terms of healthcare, physio, things like that. So you're going to see that level. It's already started and it's been there for a while, but now it's kind of ramping up over the next period of time.
When folks are looking back through the last several years, and they may say, well, a restaurant, they shifted to takeout, so maybe they were doing okay. Maybe there's an impression that your local was doing all right, but that now it's the product of just times change, things change, and maybe the restaurant industry has to adapt to deal with that. What do you say to that?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. But we got to remember that during the pandemic, if it wasn't for CEBA loans of the federal government and rent support, most restaurants would not be alive today. They'd be dead. But we also got to remember that debt is still behind them. They got to carry that debt forward, and that debt doesn't come due until December 2023. And if you can't pay the entire amount, which is either 40 grand or 60 grand, you're going to lose the discounted portion of $5,000 to $10,000. So that's going to be really tough. Most people will not make that grade. So that'll be an extra. They're going to have to start paying that debt at that time. Right now, they've got a bit of a holiday, but that debt's looming behind them. That's got to be paid.
So just to unpack that a little bit, based on some of the federal programs that were available, even provincial programs, you're saying that there's a requirement to pay back money. It wasn't free money. It wasn't like they couldn't. They have to obviously pay that back. So the timeline is what you say by the end of next year?
Yeah, December 2023 is when the CEBA loans. Now, there was a lot of money that was grant money that people don't have to pay back, and the CEBA loan was an amount of money, either $40,000 or $60,000. And if you paid it back in full on the time schedule, you would have got a discount. So if you were at $40,000, you would end up to pay, I think, $30,000 roughly. And that's what you paid back, and so that was a good deal. And so all we got is a holiday for a lot of restaurants, and that's pushing somewhere around 12 to 15 million in Nova Scotia. That's the debt on CEBA loans valued from the restaurants. So it's a lot of money that has to be paid back.
Should that program be revisited? Obviously, there's some optimism if you say, well, if you pay it back early, you can save some. You don't have to pay it all back. And obviously, if you're struggling with staffing and supply chain and all that, is there an ask of the provincial or the federal government on that?
Yeah, it's already, the ask is kind of already there. So the issues discussing around that would be longer terms, possibly a larger discount. And in some cases, people are saying get rid of it completely. Probably the latter is not that realistic, because if you add our industry and every other industry, that would be billions and billions and billions of dollars. I think more than the federal government would be prepared to take on. But I think we'll probably have some adjustment in that. I'm not sure where that adjustment's going to be, but I know that part of our ask that is to review that policy and the CEBA loans.
There's obviously a lot of turnover in the restaurant service industry. For the most part, over the years, staff would come and go. It was always an opportunity for hiring. But yet here we have new restaurants that are opening. I've noticed around Halifax specifically that have, announced a storefront, and yet it's a month, 2 months, or 3 months before they can even, announce when they're going to open, let alone actually get the doors open. What is this experience? Where are we at, Gordon? What is going to happen? Do we have any idea where's the prognosis?
So I think a lot of the newbies coming into the industry are not looking at the full breadth of what's going on. The model of running a restaurant is going to change drastically. We have a guidebook how to open and operate a restaurant. We're actually completely rebuilding this because the model's changed. What used to work for rent 2 years ago will not work for rent in the future. You're going to have to look at a different rent. A lot of landlords, jacked up rents on restaurants because they were doing high volumes and they took a percentage of it. That's not going to work anymore. In some cases it will, but in general speaking, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to rethink your menu, the size of your restaurant. Instead of having 60 seats, maybe it's going to be 30 seats. I mean, there's so many more things you're going to have to look at. Your size of your menu, how much you're going to carry in inventory now. All these things are going to drastically change what your profit ratio is going to look like coming in the pike. So it has a lot of different little plugs that have to be kind of shoved in the right holes to adjust in the industry. And I don't think any of us really know what that end result is going to look like. What we do know and understand, if we don't make change, it's going to be very challenging. And the funny thing about that, Sheldon, was really that during the period of COVID, we actually had more restaurants open than closed.
Well, it's a challenging situation for people in the food service industry. Gordon Stewart, Executive Director of the Restaurants Association of Nova Scotia. Anything else we want to add before we wrap this up?
I think we're good. Good discussion.
I appreciate that, as always. Thank you, sir.
Okay, take care.